Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It was late, close to midnight, when she finally said it. We were standing in the kitchen, plates from takeout still on the counter, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between us. I had asked her a simple question, nothing dramatic. I asked if she ever missed us, the way we used to be. She didn't even look at me. She crossed her arms, tilted her head slightly, and delivered the sentence that split everything open. I don't owe you intimacy. 4 words. Cold, rehearsed, final. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She wanted those words to land like a blade, and they did. Not because I hadn't expected rejection. I'd grown used to that. But because she had finally put into words the distance she'd been cultivating for months. I stood there, hands still on the back of a chair, staring at her as if she had just told me the weather. My pulse slowed, not quickened. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger or confusion. I felt clarity. If she didn't know me intimacy, then I didn't know her my love, my effort, or my loyalty. That night, I lay awake in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment. Her words echoed, but instead of cutting deeper, they crystallized something inside me. The balance had shifted. For years, I had been the one carrying the weight, planning dinners, fixing the car, handling bills, making sure her world ran smoothly. I had done it out of love, out of duty, out of habit. But now, those debts were cleared. The next morning, I didn't bring her coffee like I usually did. I didn't remind her about her hair appointment. I didn't check her car's gas tank before work. I left early, silent, without explanation. She didn't notice at first. She thought it was just a busy day. But by the third morning, when she found the coffee maker empty and the fridge bare, I saw the flicker in her eyes. Confusion. At work, I logged into our shared accounts and stripped away everything that had been running on my time and money. Her design subscriptions, her streaming services, the monthly boxes of skincare products. I didn't touch her personal account. I didn't need to. I simply reclaimed what was mine. That evening she came home, tossed her bag onto the counter, and opened the fridge. Empty shelves stared back at her. She turned, her voice sharper than usual, asking why I hadn't done the groceries. I rinsed my glass, looked her in the eye, and said calmly, "Because I don't owe you that." Then I walked away. Her silence followed me down the hallway, heavy and unsettled. She had thrown down her line in the sand, and I had accepted it. But she hadn't realized what that acceptance would cost her. The silence between us didn't come all at once. It spread slowly, like cracks in glass. At first, she didn't see it. She thought my distance was temporary, maybe just stress from work. She tried to brush it off, scrolling on her phone late into the night, convinced that ignoring me was still her choice. But she hadn't realized the script had already flipped. On Tuesday, she came home to find the laundry unfolded, her clothes still sitting in the dryer. She asked why I hadn't taken care of it. I was on the couch, reading, my voice calm when I said, "Because I don't owe you that." She froze for a second, caught off guard, then laughed it off like it was a joke. But it wasn't. That weekend, I left early for the gym and didn't come back until afternoon. Usually, I would have brought brunch or at least a coffee for her. Instead, I walked in with nothing but my gym bag. She was sitting at the table, arms crossed, waiting. She asked if I had forgotten. I shrugged, poured myself water, and said, "Not my responsibility anymore." The way her jaw tightened told me she was starting to understand. It wasn't just the chores. It was the little things she had always counted on. I stopped filling her car with gas. I stopped fixing the leaky faucet she kept complaining about. I stopped reminding her about her deadlines when she was lost in her endless scrolling. For years, I had been her safety net. Now, she was falling, and there was nothing beneath her. The strange part? I didn't feel anger. I felt lighter. Every task I stopped doing was a piece of weight lifted off me. For the first time in years, I wasn't her caretaker, her planner, her provider. I was just myself, moving quietly through my own routines. One night, she tried to provoke me. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and asked if I was punishing her. I looked at her once, expression steady, and said, "No, I'm just living by your rules." She waited for me to explain, but I didn't. I turned back to what I was doing, leaving her to stand there in silence. That silence began to unnerve her, because for the first time, it wasn't hers. It was mine. By the second week, the change was undeniable. She was no longer just brushing off my silence. She was circling it, trying to poke holes in it, testing to see if I would break. One night, I came home late from the gym, sweat still clinging to my shirt, and she was waiting in the kitchen. A bottle of wine was open, 2 glasses already poured. She smiled, almost playfully, and said she thought we could have a drink together like old times. I walked past the table, rinsed my shaker bottle, and told her I wasn't thirsty. I could feel her eyes burning into my back as I went upstairs, leaving her to drink alone. That was the moment the shift became real. She had never needed to chase before. She had always believed she could reject, withdraw, withhold, and I would bend further toward her. But now, for the first time, she was extending her hand into the emptiness, and I wasn't reaching back. The following morning, she tried another tactic. She dressed up before work, not the casual jeans she usually wore, but a fitted dress she hadn't touched in years. Perfume lingered in the hallway as she brushed past me, waiting for me to notice. I sipped my coffee, grabbed my bag, and left without a word. She looked down at herself as the door closed, like she was questioning who she had gotten dressed for. I noticed her starting to unravel in other ways too. The dishes piled up because I no longer touched them. The groceries ran out faster because I only bought what I needed. One night, she opened the fridge and muttered under her breath that there was nothing to eat. I sat calmly at the table with my own plate of food and said, "Then maybe you should cook." She didn't respond, but I saw her grip the refrigerator door until her knuckles whitened. She had always believed the power was hers. That intimacy, affection, even basic warmth were gifts she could give or take at will. But when I stopped playing along, she was left staring at the structure of our marriage without the scaffolding I had quietly built. And she didn't like what she saw. That Friday, my phone buzzed while I was at work. It was her, calling in the middle of the day. She said she just wanted to check in, her tone too sweet, too careful. I kept my answer short, told her I was busy, and hung up. For the rest of the afternoon, my screen stayed dark. She didn't call again. I realized then that she was beginning to feel what I had lived with for years: emptiness, silence, absence. But for me, it no longer felt like pain. It felt like freedom. The cracks started showing in places I hadn't expected. She began hovering more, lingering in rooms she used to breeze through. When I sat in the living room, she would sit too, not scrolling on her phone this time, but just sitting, pretending to watch TV, pretending to relax, when really her eyes kept drifting to me, measuring every movement, every silence. I didn't acknowledge it. I let her sit in the quiet she had once weaponized, watching it turn against her. One night, I was in the middle of fixing myself a simple dinner, steak and vegetables, just for me, when she came into the kitchen dressed like we had a reservation somewhere. Her hair was styled, her makeup done, heels clicking against the tile. She leaned against the counter and asked if I had forgotten something. I looked at her, calm, and asked what she meant. She said she thought we might go out, spend some time together. I plated my food, took my fork, and told her she must have made those plans alone. Then I carried my plate to the table and ate while she stood there in silence. The rejection on her face was different this time. It wasn't anger. It was realization. She was beginning to understand what it felt like to be invisible in your own home. Over the next few days, she tried harder. Coffee appeared on the counter in the mornings, brewed exactly the way I used to make it for her. I walked past it without touching the cup. Dinner was cooked one night, the smell of pasta filling the kitchen. I thanked her politely, ate, and left my plate on the table. I could see the frustration building behind her forced smile, the cracks widening with every polite nod I gave instead of the praise she wanted. By the end of the week, she shifted again. She started sending long texts in the middle of the day, filled with nostalgia. She wrote about the first road trip we took, the night we stayed up until dawn talking about nothing, the time she said she had never felt more alive than with me. I read them all, then put my phone down. No reply. The silence between us stretched further, until even her words bounced back like echoes with no answer. The woman who once told me she didn't know me intimacy was now staring at the life she had built without it. And for the first time, she was afraid of the emptiness she had created. By the 5th week, her composure had thinned into something raw. The woman who once dismissed me with a shrug now followed me with her eyes every time I crossed a room. She was quieter, less certain, her phone often face down on the counter instead of glued to her hand. I could tell she was waiting for me to snap, to break the silence, to ask for her again. But I didn't. I moved through the house like a guest who had already decided not to stay. One evening, I came home to find the entire place spotless. The dishes were washed, the laundry folded, even the leaky faucet in the bathroom fixed. She was on the couch, pretending to scroll through her phone, but I could feel the weight of her anticipation. She wanted me to notice, to acknowledge her effort. I sat down across the room, opened my laptop, and began working. Not a word. After a while, I heard her set her phone aside and sigh into the silence. Later that night, she tried again. She stepped into the bedroom wearing a dress I hadn't seen since our anniversary years ago. She lingered in the doorway, waiting for me to look up. I didn't. I kept reading, the lamp casting a calm glow on the pages. When she finally lay down beside me, turned toward me instead of away, her hand brushed against my arm. I stayed still. Her breathing faltered, and she rolled back over, staring into the dark. She had built her control on the belief that I would always reach, that no matter how much she withheld, I would chase. But now she was the one left stretching across the distance, and I was no longer there to meet her halfway. The following morning, she made pancakes, the smell drifting through the kitchen like bait. She placed a plate in front of me, smiling too brightly, waiting for approval. I ate, thanked her once, and left without lingering. She stood at the sink, staring at the stack of untouched pancakes she had made for herself, her shoulders heavy with something she didn't want to name. It wasn't cruelty. I wasn't punishing her. I was simply living by the rules she had laid down. She had said she didn't owe me intimacy, and now I was showing her what life looked like when I didn't owe her my devotion, my effort, or my loyalty. The silence no longer felt like a weapon aimed at me. It was the ground I stood on, steady, unshakable, while she stumbled on the emptiness she once created. By now, even her friends had started to notice. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in the next room. Her voice was low, uneasy, as she told someone that I had been distant, that I wasn't the same man anymore. She tried to paint it like I was punishing her, sulking, being unreasonable. But there was a tremor in her voice, the kind that betrayed something deeper. She wasn't just explaining me to her friends. She was trying to explain me to herself. When I walked into the kitchen, she ended the call abruptly. She looked at me as if she wanted to say something, but the words never came. Instead, she busied herself with rearranging things on the counter, pretending the conversation hadn't happened. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Her silence told me enough. That week, she started staying home more. The outings with her friends, the endless scrolling, the late nights, those habits began to shrink. Instead, she lingered around me, waiting for any sign that I might still be chasing. I didn't give her one. I left early for the gym, came back late, made my own meals, and disappeared into my own routines. One night, she tried to corner me with vulnerability. She came into the bedroom after midnight, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. She sat on the edge of the bed, turned toward me, and whispered that she felt like she was losing me. The old version of me might have rushed to reassure her, might have promised to fix things. Instead, I rolled over, pulled the blanket higher, and let the silence answer for me. Minutes passed before she finally slipped under the covers, her body turned away, her breathing unsteady. The power she once held over me had evaporated, and she was beginning to feel the void of it. I could see it in the way she checked her phone constantly, waiting for a message that never came. I could see it in the way she hovered in the kitchen, pretending to cook while glancing over her shoulder to see if I was watching. I wasn't. The balance had shifted completely. She had declared that she didn't owe me intimacy, as if it freed her. But in truth, she had freed me. And the life I was living now, calm, focused, detached, was proof of how much lighter I felt without the chains of her approval. Each day I pulled further away, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with quiet resolve. And with every step I took, she was left behind in the silence she had created, finally forced to sit in it alone. By the 7th week, the weight of her own choices finally began to crush her. The woman who once walked through our home like she owned every inch of it now moved with hesitation, almost timid. She no longer spoke to me with the same sharp tone. Instead, her words were softer, carefully measured, as though she were afraid of pushing me further away. But she didn't realize that I was already gone in every way that mattered. One evening, I came home from the gym later than usual. She was sitting at the dining table, a full meal spread out in front of her, candles lit, the kind of effort she hadn't made in years. She looked up quickly, her eyes searching my face for any sign of recognition. I sat across from her, ate in silence, and when I finished, I stood, thanked her politely, and carried my plate to the sink. She stayed at the table long after I left, staring at the untouched food she had prepared for herself. The cracks deepened after that. I noticed her pacing at night, walking the hallway when she thought I was asleep. Sometimes she stopped at the bedroom door, standing there for minutes, her hand on the knob, before retreating down the hall. She was restless, uneasy, caught in the very silence she had once used to control me. She tried to regain some of her old confidence by questioning me. One Saturday morning, she asked where I was going, her voice trembling under the weight of casualness she tried to fake. I looked at her, calm and steady, and said, "Out." That was it. No explanation, no justification. Her lips parted as if she wanted to push for more, but she didn't. She simply nodded, and I left her standing in the kitchen with questions that would never be answered. At work, I noticed how much lighter I felt. Colleagues commented on the change, my focus, my energy, the way I carried myself. I wasn't weighed down by constant rejection anymore. I wasn't drained by the endless effort of holding everything together. My life had narrowed into something simple and sharp, and she wasn't part of it. When I returned home that evening, she was waiting in the living room, photo albums spread across the coffee table. Pictures of our wedding, vacations, moments she thought would pull me back. She looked up at me with a smile that was more plea than joy, asking if I remembered how happy we once were. I glanced at the photos, nodded once, and walked upstairs. Behind me, I heard her close the album with a hollow sound that echoed through the quiet house. The woman who had once told me she owed me nothing was now the one trying to bargain with memories. But I had stopped owing her long ago. By the 8th week, she was no longer the same woman who once threw her words like knives. The edge was gone. What remained was uncertainty, hesitation, and a fear she tried desperately to hide. She began calling me during the day, something she had never done before. The calls weren't about anything important, just questions about dinner, about whether I'd be home early, about things she could have easily handled herself. Each time, my answers were short, clipped, leaving her suspended in silence. She was reaching, and I wasn't offering a hand. One evening, I came home to find her dressed as if we were heading out, makeup carefully done, perfume trailing behind her. She smiled nervously and said she thought we could try a new restaurant together, just the two of us. I told her I wasn't hungry, then walked past her. She stood frozen in the hallway, her lipstick bright against the pale look of shock spreading across her face. After that, her efforts grew more frantic. She began cooking elaborate meals, setting the table with candles and music, waiting for me to acknowledge the gesture. I ate quietly, thanked her once, and went upstairs. She stayed behind at the table, staring at her untouched plate as the music played on. Her attempts spilled into the night. She started sliding closer to me in bed, reaching out lightly, her hand resting on my arm as though testing the waters. I lay still, breathing evenly, giving her nothing in return. When she pulled back, the air in the room grew heavier than any fight we had ever had. I began noticing other changes too. She no longer bragged to her friends about her independence. The phone calls I overheard were different now, quieter, tinged with anxiety. She was no longer telling them how distant I was. She was confessing that she didn't know how to reach me. That admission alone told me everything. She wasn't in control anymore. She was spiraling. At work, my colleagues noticed my transformation more than she ever had. They commented on my energy, my focus, the weight I seemed to have shed not just from my body, but from my life. For years, I had been defined by what I gave to her. Now I was defined by what I had reclaimed for myself. When I came home that Friday, she was waiting by the door, her eyes red, her voice trembling as she asked if we could talk. I looked at her for a moment, then walked past without answering. The silence trailed behind me, heavier than her tears, sharper than any words I could have spoken. She had once declared she didn't know me intimacy. But now, she was realizing just how much she had always owed to my love, my effort, and my loyalty, and what life looked like without them. By the 9th week, her unraveling was impossible to hide. The woman who once carried herself with certainty now moved like someone bracing for a storm. She hovered in the kitchen when I came home, waiting for me to notice the meals she cooked, the house she cleaned, the effort she poured into every small detail. But my silence met her every time. One evening, I walked into the living room to find photo albums spread across the coffee table again. She had been flipping through them, the wedding pictures on top. When she saw me, her voice was soft, almost pleading. She asked if I remembered how happy we had been, how much we once laughed together. I glanced at the photos, gave a small nod, and went upstairs. Behind me, the sound of her closing the album echoed through the empty room. Her attempts became more desperate after that. She started waiting for me by the door, asking when I'd be back, if I wanted her to come with me. Each question was thinly veiled panic, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. My answers were short, steady, detached. Out. Later. No. The silence afterwards swallowed her whole. At night, she no longer turned her back in bed. Instead, she faced me, her eyes open in the dark, searching for something that wasn't there. Once, she whispered that she felt like I was slipping away. I didn't respond. I lay still, my breathing calm, until she rolled back over and stared at the wall, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs she thought I couldn't hear. Her friends stopped calling as often. The confidence she used to show them had disappeared. When I did overhear her on the phone, her tone was no longer dismissive. It was uncertain, broken, filled with questions she couldn't answer. She was trying to explain my silence, but she couldn't, because even she no longer believed her own excuses. Meanwhile, my life outside the house only grew stronger. I was sharper at work, more focused at the gym, more alive than I had felt in years. People noticed the difference, and I noticed their attention. For the first time, I wasn't defined by what I gave to her. I was defined by what I had taken back for myself. One night, as I walked past her in the hallway, she reached out and caught my wrist. Her voice cracked as she asked if I still loved her. I looked at her hand gripping me, then back at her eyes. I didn't answer. I gently pulled free and kept walking. The silence that followed was louder than any truth I could have spoken. The 10th week came with a strange calm. The house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a museum, silent, still, filled with relics of something long dead. She moved through it quietly, her footsteps hesitant, her eyes always following me, but never daring to meet mine for long. The distance she had once demanded now consumed her, and she finally understood that I wasn't just stepping back. I was already gone. One Saturday morning, I packed a small bag. Not with anger, not with haste, just with the same quiet precision I had carried these past weeks. A few clothes, my documents, the things that mattered to me. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom as I zipped the bag shut, her face pale, her hands trembling. She asked what I was doing, her voice breaking halfway through the sentence. I didn't answer. I lifted the bag, walked past her, and headed downstairs. She followed me to the kitchen, her words spilling now, desperate, begging. She said she was sorry, that she hadn't meant it, that she could change. For the first time in weeks, I looked at her fully. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slumped, her voice small. The woman who had once told me she owed me nothing was standing there trying to bargain for everything she had thrown away. I set my keys on the counter, looked at her one last time, and said, calm and steady, "You were right. You don't owe me intimacy, and I don't owe you anything either." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and final. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Just silence. And in that silence, I turned and walked out the door. The morning sun hit my face as I stepped outside, the air crisp and alive. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. No begging, no explaining, no arguments. Just freedom. Behind me, the house stood still, filled with echoes that no longer belonged to me. I didn't look back. There was nothing there worth looking for. The life I had carried on my shoulders for so long was gone, and what remained was mine alone. As I drove away, the road stretched wide and open, the future no longer tethered to her rejection or her rules. She had taught me to live without her, and I had learned the lesson better than she ever expected. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. I hadn't fought. I had simply walked away. And in the end, that silence spoke louder than anything I could have ever said. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.